Welcome back to Analysis. Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan has been involved in a long political struggle against one-time ally, the cleric Fethullah Gulen, leader of the religious and social movement Hizmet. Erdogan has accused Gulen of orchestrating corruption claims against him in a move to undermine both him and his AKP party. A law has recently been passed allowing the state to close schools and educational establishments linked to the Gulen movement. Gulen has consistently denied being behind any moves to remove or unseat Erdogan, but has often criticised Erdogan's rule. Gulen famously told the Wall Street Journal earlier this year that the Turkish people are upset that in the last 2 years, democratic progress has been reversed. In this half of the programme, I'm joined by Mutallep Ünlüer, who's chairman of the Union of European Turkish Democrats, and Zeynep Kosasoglu, who's the researcher at the Centre for Turkish Studies in London. Welcome to the programme. So, Mutallep, do you think that the long-running struggle with the Gulen movement is part of what's going on now, or are the street protests something entirely different?
I think it's something related to each other. But one thing is a point of correction is the Erdogan has passed a law to close the school. They made a legislation to close the prep schools. Prep school is substitute schools to mainstream. So
like
that is about independent school is they continue. They have many independent schools, and no problem with that. If we come to that, if they related the Gezi movement and the Gulen, maybe. I mean, one has to look at the history of the Gulen movement, how it starts, how it become a big corporation. Now it's challenging the state. And Gulen movement starts in early 60s as a followers of the Said Nursi, who is one of the most prominent Turkish Kurdish alim, ulama, intellectuals in his time in the 20th century. And it started in the city of Izmir as a small mosque, and it developed in the 90s and 2000, late 20th century. One of the biggest corporations in Turkey. I
understand it's got a long history, but do you think now that it's intersecting with the street protests?
Now Erdogan has a great deal improvement in Turkey since he became a power 2002. GDP, become a five-fold increased in Turkish income, and the people become rich, and the real investment going into the main structures in Turkey. Somehow, the establishments, traditional Turkish establishments, is unhappy with this. Why? Because they are become accountable to the state. Their banks, their corporation. In the past, they had a free of everything, without any scrutiny.
Okay, well, let me bring Zeynep in on this. Is that a picture that you recognise, or would you say that there's a greater degree of popular unrest than perhaps that picture would give us?
I think we tend to confuse different issues when we talk about the Gezi movement and also the Gülen movement and its infiltration into Turkish politics. Of course, with the arrival of the AKP, Turkey has experienced certain improvements. And of course, the Gülen movement has been infiltrating state institutions for the past decades. While these are realities, we cannot confuse them and use them to discredit discredit the Gezi movement and the kind of discontent that they have. So it is possible that, just as any institution, the Gülen movement might have, there are maybe people from the Gülen movement on the streets walking with the people in Istanbul, in Ankara, but that doesn't change the fact that there are certain topics of discontent that the public share, especially we've seen that in the last few days with the death of Berkin Elvan. It's a huge amount of people that have been on the streets, and it is not just for one child who has died, which is symbolic of a broader discontent that people have had before. So I think...
Do you think that what's happening perhaps is that the picture that Mutallep painted would have found a broader agreement earlier in Erdogan's rule, and that what perhaps unites some of the Gulen people and the protesters is that they feel that in the latter part of it, it's moved away from that?
It is true that before it was easier to argue with certain facts from the economic development of Turkey, but slowly that has also been revealed that maybe the Turkish economy's growth model has not been perfect and has not actually been the best way to for Turkey to go. As actually, when you look at what Prime Minister Erdogan has said about how these accusations against him are being used to destabilize Turkey and kind of affect its economy as well. Well, maybe if they hadn't grown the economy in this sense, in this type with kind of depending on the foreign inflows, then maybe these accusations wouldn't have affected the Turkish economy that much with the currency especially. So. Yeah.
See, now, how do you see the intersection of these two things? Is it that for different reasons, two different groups have become disenchanted with Erdogan's rule? In its
I don't think it's only two different groups. There are too many. In fact, in my eyes, there are too many groups, and there are also external groups. Everything became so complex and so complicated. I don't think any of us can give a clear reason. There are too many reasons. But at the end of the day, the way I see things, we're talking about democracy in Turkey. We can criticize Erdogan, we can criticize the protesters, whatever ideas we may have. At the end of the day in Turkey, after 90 years of democracy, we are stuck with always one political party. And we're always forgetting, do we have alternatives? If we want to do criticism, we want to do demonstrations, we should do it at the ballot box. But that's a good thing for Erdogan to say. He can afford to say that because he knows there's nobody else. We have no alternatives to vote for. So we will end up voting for Erdogan again. So that isn't the answer. The answer is, I think, I did a little bit of research. I asked people who are more expert than me about why is it that in Turkey, think of Gezi Park and the kind of intellectuals, women, children, young, you see all kinds of, it used to be all men faces on the politics. Now you can see women on the street, you can see young people on the street, you can see children. But a lot of them haven't got an option where they're going to vote on next elections or local elections or general elections in order for us to make the democratic changes that we're all craving for in Turkey. Everybody claims that they're doing the best they can for their own countries, and we don't get on with each other. We have too many groups, too many sections. You got Alevis, you got Kurds, you got Turks who claim to be Turkish, you got other minority groups in Turkey. Then you got the external forces in the area, Israeli-Arab conflict. You got the American interests in the area. There is all kinds of people mixing, and most of these demonstrations, I think, is a very has many mixed reasons behind it.
Do you think? But do you think in this sort of very complicated picture, do you think that the Gulen and Erdogan thing is overstated? Does it have very much significance, or should we not be paying much attention to it?
Gulen movement now plotting against the state, not just Erdogan or the AK Party. They're plotting against the state. Their own agenda. It's not relative to Turkish people. And what the Erdogan claims, best way to make your opinion new is the ballot box. As the friends rightly indicated, Erdogan is very popular amongst the population of Turkey because not his the handsome or anything, but what he done for that country. He made a huge reforms on the democracy of the Turkey, giving a lot of rights to individuals and the communities, particularly the Kurdish community. They never dreamed of those sort of things they gained during the Erdogan rule. Economically, Turkey is booming.
But excuse me to come in, but
I'll come round. Go on.
Just about the ballot box, I think we're putting too much symbolism on a very small moment in social relations between a government and a state in any country. The ballot box is symbolically very important for democracy, but in order for, as you have mentioned, proper opposition parties to form, in order for...
But the question is how?
How, exactly. Well, the question is you need social institutions, not state institutions, social institutions that people can come together to express their collective
Well, let me ask you something.
opinions.
What is
When you look
Barra's system? We have to
exactly,
define
that's
that
what
one.
I'm coming to.
Well, let me
Exactly.
put
When you
this
look
point
at the
to you,
media, when you look at the education system, when you look at how if people are allowed to form their own institutions and be free to express themselves, assemble on the streets, because assembly is not just inside a building. Assembly is also outside on the streets, being able to communicate your opinions. If you cannot do that, you cannot form an opposition party. You cannot, before an opposition party, you need to form an opposing view, common view, and when you also the threshold, electoral threshold as well. And when you look at the Kurdish movement, yes, it is important that they have definitely been given more rights, but just confining the Kurdish language teaching to private institutions for people who have definitely more money to either fund those schools or send their children to those schools. Or when you look at for example, the first Kurdish TV was a state TV, not necessarily anyone could use Kurdish in their.
Well, let's explore that point a minute, because it's a very important point. See, every long-standing government becomes unpopular. And they tend to become authoritarian. The Thatcher government did in this country. The Blair government did the same thing. And every prime minister in that situation says the same thing. If you don't like it, go to the ballot box. But the truth of the matter is, as people know, and as Zeynep just said, democratic freedoms aren't limited to the ballot box. Freedom of assembly, freedom of trade union organisation, freedom of speech. These are things within which the ballot, if they don't function, the ballot box isn't much use.
There's only one ballot box.
One, two.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is that in Turkey, I asked to people who are more experts on the issue, you can't become a new political identity and enter into the elections because you need to pass a certain barrier. And they make it so difficult, and I think it suits all three parties not to create that option to the electorate. So you end up voting, you know, you can choose any, it's like there was an English joke, you can choose any flag you like as long as it's red. And that's exactly what the politics in Turkey, for me, this is my opinion. Yes, Erdogan did a lot of things what other governments didn't do before. But the Erdogan party learned that to get to the point that you want to get to, you need to use economics. And they've done that well. Congratulations. But you cannot take human rights away or freedom of speech. When it comes to arts, freedom of speech, there's some problems. And that's why you're going to have all these demonstrations.
Okay. Yeah. So what do you think about this?
One can't blame the opposition parties inadequacy to ruling party, because they are inadequate. They have no relation to Turkish people. During the last three elections, Erdogan popularity increased, never decreased. And I'm sure on the next election, that increase will maybe go up 1 or 2 more points. Come to other point, democratization is, in Turkey has very well functional union movement, and the student movement, and the civil rights, NGOs, and the improvements they done within the law, incredible, unimaginable, the past Turkish laws. The torture is eradicated almost.
Well, now it's on the streets.
No. Torture by the state used to be, people used to disappear in the, when they arrested. Those things eradicated, state nothing to do about. In the street, those thing is the anarchist movement. It's normal. It's not normal demonstration. The destruction, huge destructions.
There's a hell of a lot of anarchists in the last few days, then, isn't it?
Yeah, they can be.
I mean, every anarchist from around Europe must have been there.
Well, in Turkey, I traditionally have those anarchist resources.
That number?
Why?
That big?
Millions.
I mean, come on.
Millions.
Millions of anarchists.
Yeah. I mean, peaceful demonstration, police will never intervene. I'm not defending the police or anything, but any peaceful movements in Turkey, I don't think so anyone will oppose to them. Okay. But the destruction of the property and the government property and the attack on the police, all same thing in this country. What will the reaction of the police? And we've seen it in the Thatcher era.
Well, but I'm not sure that's an advert, given that the Metropolitan Police in this country have just been found institutionally racist. But what do you think about this? Is this an accurate picture of the demonstrators?
No, but I think it depends on the kind of narrative you want to believe. And my first point is there are many students that are in jail right now just for having placards in campus, just for having sent out brochures in campus for their own organizations.
Can you give a figure on how many people arrested or convicted? Do you have a figures?
No, I don't have any figures with me at the moment, but I'm sure you don't have any figures of the number of anarchists on the street in Istanbul right now either. We were not here with documents in our hands, but also when you look at the streets, I also don't agree with equating physical property with human life either. Yes, there were certain pieces of stone pieces of sidewalk that were removed from the sidewalks. Some buses were burnt. Yeah, we've seen those pictures as well. But that still doesn't justify, because that was also very minimal compared to the number of people that were out. But I'm not going to compare that ratio. But no matter what the ratio is, you cannot compare damage done to property to damage done to human life. And I think that's fundamentally where I differ. That's my own.
What do you think? What do you think about the character of this? Is it just a sort of tiny number of discontents who aren't getting the message about economic prosperity, which is kind of...
Well, as I said, there are, in every demonstration in Turkey, there are genuinely those who attend with one thing in mind, to demonstrate, and then there are those who attend, they may be in small numbers, to basically create problems. So it's a mixture of demonstrators, but you cannot identify them, who is there for what. There's a big chaos. But what I don't understand from Erdogan, for example, I was invited to another channel when he was in Gezi Park, and he was in Morocco. And I said to myself at the program as well, when Erdogan arrives to Istanbul airport, if he goes directly to the Gezi Park and picks up one child, one lady, and takes a picture and says, I'm going to deal with your problems, to separate these demonstrators, because there were women there, there were children there, they were not sort of terrorists. They are your subjects. They're the people that elected you to look after them. They may be in minority, it doesn't matter, but you can't say, I'm holding 50% at home, I can hardly hold 50% at home. What is he talking about? He's splitting the nation into two, 50% here and 50% there. Every minority, every member of your public is your member, and you're looking after. Go to the park, pick up a child, speak to a lady, and say, I'm going to deal with your problem.
Okay, so what about that? The approach is, even if you disagree with the protesters, even if you think they've got no case at all, that this is a confrontational way of dealing with it, which is counterproductive, and a more engaging way would be more productive.
In my opinion, real problem is it's not the people who demonstrated in the Gezi Park. There is a deeper than that roots. The Turkish bankers, Turkish establishments, and they want to use as a tool these people. That's the real reason behind, because these people protesting for the 15 or 20 trees, they're uprooting from the Gezi Park. But at the same time, Erdogan planting billions of trees somewhere around the country, in where it was, the virtually desert becoming a forest now. I mean, it is not just tree,
becomes symbolic of a certain form of economic.
But this is rooted from the Turkish establishment. They want to uproot. They know they can't do it through the ballot box, democratic way to remove Erdogan. They're using the Gezi Park, they're using the Gülen movement, they're using any other means to remove him from the power. That's all. That's all there is to it.
Let me take a step first, and then we'll come back.
And I think that there's something fundamentally wrong with what has just been said, as in they were protesting for 20 trees in a park, and there are more trees being built. Well, who is choosing to build which trees where? It can't just be the decision of the Prime Minister to cut those trees in one park and decide to plant trees otherwise. That's not what people were protesting, not because three trees were were going to be destroyed. That was not the problem. The problem was they were not consulted. The people there, they did not want it. It could have been, maybe there would be no trees in the park. That's not the, yeah.
Yeah, as I said, yes, I do agree to some extent with Mr. Mittal that there are some demonstrators that they're there to create problems. That I agree, but it's up to the Prime Minister to identify by actually listening to his electorate, to everyone, showing intention that he's deeply concerned and he wants to deal with it. It's the intent so that you can separate those people who appear at demonstrators, that those who are genuinely there for a genuine reason can come forward and speak to the Prime Minister. But he can't turn and say everyone is a traitor, everyone is a demonstrator. He can't say that. You need to listen to people. It can be one person, 5 persons. You have to listen.
As far as I remember, and Erdogan take a delegation from these movement, protesters, accepted his Prime Minister office. He listened them, he promised them to act on them. I don't remember what was the discussion. But the thing is, the decision to uproot those trees, it wasn't the Prime Minister's or the state. It's the municipality of Istanbul. They want to do the... Oh, sorry.
Go on.
In the meantime,
There's an opportunity. You were safe.
So I do apologize.
no, that is the problem. The fundamental problem, again, is that trees, how many trees, 5 trees, 10 trees, even if it was no one's decision. That's a very tiny detail that we're missing the grand point. Let's say that even these people are tools of an unseen conspiracy against the AKP. Let's take that as well. But if these people are on the street, not everyone is sent a letter saying, we're going to use you as a tool, please go on the street. They have certain discontents within them. For example, the new laws that were being passed lately after the corruption probe, the new internet law, the new law organizing the High Council of Prosecutors and Judges. Some people are discontent with Erdogan's influence on the media. So why doesn't he address these issues specifically? Maybe it was not about 5 trees. Now it's actually much bigger than those trees. So it's time to address them.
On that question, we're going to have to leave it, I'm afraid, because that's all we've got time for. But I'm sure that as Turkish politics develops, we will be revisiting this question and others that are thrown up by the future development of social and political life in Turkey. So do rejoin us for future editions of Analysis.